Imagine a gas station in a country that sits on top of the largest oil reserves in the solar system. The pumps are rusted. The digital displays are dark. There's a line of cars stretching for 3 miles, not waiting for fuel, but abandoned by their owners because the currency needed to fill the tank weighs more than the car itself. Turn on the news today, January 5th, 2026. You see the footage of American soldiers escorting Nicolas Maduro onto a plane in handcuffs. You see the headlines cheering for the restoration of democracy. You see the pundits on CNN and Fox News talking about the end of a tyranny. We are taught that this is a story of political liberation. We are told that Venezuela failed because of socialism. We are told it failed because a bus driver didn't know how to run an economy. We are told it failed because of corruption. But that is a fairy tale for the naive. If you look at the forensic accounting of the last 100 years, you won't see a political failure. You will see a hostile corporate takeover. You will see a century-long foreclosure process where a creditor, the United States, systematically dismantled the debtor's ability to pay, drove the valuation of the asset into the ground, and then, just this week, finally seized the collateral. Venezuela didn't commit suicide. It was murdered by the ledger. The poverty you see in Caracas is not an accident of incompetence. It is the calculated result of a financial siege designed to lower the acquisition price of 300 billion barrels of crude oil. The recent liberation was just the final stamp on the eviction notice. To understand this bankruptcy, we have to ignore the politicians and look at the mechanics. The villain in this story is not Maduro. It is not Chavez. It isn't even Donald Trump or Joe Biden. The villain is a financial weapon known as monopsony. You know what a monopoly is: one seller controlling the market. A monopsony is the opposite. It is a market condition where there is only one buyer. For 100 years, the United States engineered a reality where it was the only customer that mattered for Venezuelan oil. This wasn't an accident of geography. It was a feat of industrial engineering. Venezuelan oil is not like Saudi oil. Saudi oil is light and sweet. It flows like water and is easy to refine. Venezuelan oil, specifically from the Orinoco Belt, is extra heavy and sour. It is essentially sludge. It is tar. To turn that tar into gasoline, you need massive, specialized, multi-billion-dollar refineries with specific coking units. In the 1920s and 30s, the American oil giants, Standard Oil, Gulf, Texaco, made a strategic decision. They built those specialized refineries in one place, the U.S. Gulf Coast. They specifically designed the infrastructure of Texas and Louisiana to be the only lock that fits the Venezuelan key. This meant that Venezuela was not a sovereign nation. It was a company town. And the company store was Washington, D.C. If Venezuela ever tried to sell its oil to Europe or Asia, they couldn't, because no one else had the machines to process it efficiently. The mechanism of the heist was simple: make the victim totally dependent on a single revenue stream, and then, whenever they tried to renegotiate the contract, threaten to shut off the valve. This trap was baited in 1922, when the Barroso No. 2 well exploded in the Maracaibo Basin. The American oil men arrived with checkbooks and contracts written in English. They didn't just buy the oil, they bought the economic soul of the country. They created the Dutch disease on a continental scale. The massive influx of petrodollars made the Venezuelan currency artificially strong. A strong currency sounds good, but for a developing nation, it is a poison pill. It made Venezuelan coffee and cocoa, their original exports, too expensive for the world to buy. It made imported American food cheaper than growing it locally. Within 20 years, Venezuelan agriculture was dead. The country stopped producing value and started extracting rent. By the 1950s, they were importing their lettuce, their milk, and their cars from the United States. They were rich in cash flow, but bankrupt in sovereignty. Even the so-called nationalization of 1976 was a fraud. The Venezuelan government took ownership of the wells, but the American companies kept the service contracts, the technology licenses, and the marketing networks. PDVSA, the state oil company, became a state within a state. Its executives lived in Miami, sent their kids to American schools, and ensured that the oil was sold to their U.S. partners at a discount. They called it efficiency. A forensic accountant calls it transfer pricing looting. They were selling the nation's birthright for pennies on the dollar, ensuring the U.S. refineries kept the profit margins while the Venezuelan state took the risk. Fast forward to 1999. Hugo Chavez takes power. Whether you love him or hate him is irrelevant to the ledger. What matters is that he acted like a new CEO taking over a failing company. He audited the books. He looked at the Orinoco Belt projects and realized the scam. The foreign oil companies were paying a royalty of just 1%. 1%. In 2001, Chavez passed the new hydrocarbons law. He raised the royalty to 30%. He told the foreign companies, if you want our oil, you pay the market rate. If you don't like it, leave. This was the moment the war began. It wasn't about democracy. It was about the profit margin of ExxonMobil and Chevron. The 30% royalty would have transferred billions of dollars from American shareholders to the Venezuelan treasury. The bank, the The United States decided to foreclose immediately. The 2002 coup attempt was unique in history. It wasn't led by a general. It was led by the head of the Business Federation. The U.S. recognized the coup government within hours. Why? Because the first thing the coup government did, before they even suspended the Constitution, was to announce they were canceling the oil deliveries to Cuba and restoring the old royalty rates. It was a corporate restructuring disguised as a political revolution. When Chavez survived, thanks to the loyalty of the army paratroopers and the people in the slums, the strategy shifted. If they couldn't fire the CEO, they would burn down the factory. Then came the oil strike of 2002-2003. The media called it a general strike. That is a lie. It was a management lockout. The executives at PDVSA, the old guard who answered to Washington, decided to shut down the industry. But you can't just turn off an oil field like a light switch. It requires complex software. The Venezuelan oil industry was run by a system called Intesa, which was a joint venture with an American tech firm. The executives changed the passwords. They remotely sabotaged the electronic brains of the refineries. It was the first act of cyber warfare in history. They paralyzed the country's cash flow. Chavez responded with the whistle. He went on television and fired 18,000 of these executives and managers by name. The Western media screamed that he was purging the experts. But from a business perspective, he was breaking a sabotage operation. He brought in retirees, university students, and the military to hack the systems and restart the pumps. They got the oil flowing again, but the damage was done. The institutional memory of the industry fled to Houston, Calgary, and Bogota. They took the geological maps, the maintenance schedules, and the technical data with them. The efficiency of PDVSA began to bleed out. The U.S. had successfully decapitated the technical capacity of the rival firm. For a few years, high oil prices hid the damage. From 2004 to 2012, oil hit $100 a barrel. Venezuela was flush with cash. Chavez used this money to pay off the IMF, to build housing, and to reduce poverty. But he made a fatal error. He didn't fix the monopsony. He was still selling the majority of the oil to the United States. He bought Cietgo, the refinery network in the U.S., thinking it gave him leverage. He thought owning the gas stations in America made him safe. He didn't realize he was just parking his best asset inside the enemy's jurisdiction, where it could be seized at any moment. After Chavez died and oil prices crashed in 2014, the trap snapped shut. Venezuela's revenue dropped from $80 billion a year to $20 billion. Any normal country in this situation would restructure its debt. They would go to the bankruptcy court and say, "We can't pay right now, let's work out a deal." But Venezuela was not allowed to be a normal country. The U.S. credit rating agencies kept Venezuela's risk rating at default levels, even though Venezuela was paying every single bond payment on time. They were paying billions to Wall Street while their people were literally starving, just to avoid giving the U.S. an excuse to seize their assets. It was the financial equivalent of a man cutting off his own arm to pay the mortgage, only for the bank to raise the interest rate. In 2017, the Trump administration signed Executive Order 13808. This is the smoking gun of the bankruptcy. It didn't ban oil imports yet. It did something more insidious. It banned Venezuela from restructuring its debt. Think about the cruelty of that. Venezuela wanted to pay. They wanted to swap old expensive bonds for new ones with longer timelines. The U.S. government made it illegal for U.S. banks to participate in the swap. They legally forced Venezuela into default. They locked the doors of the bankruptcy court so the debtor couldn't file for protection. This triggered the hunger bonds era. In May 2017, Goldman Sachs bought $2.8 billion worth of PDVSA bonds for pennies on the dollar, paying just $865 million. They bought them from the desperate Venezuelan central bank. The U.S. political establishment feigned outrage, but this was the plan: force Venezuela to sell its future for cents on the dollar just to survive another month. Then came 2019, the interim government strategy. The U.S. declared that Nicolas Maduro was not the president and recognized Juan Guaido. This was a legal fiction designed to facilitate a bank robbery. By recognizing Guaido, the U.S. transferred control of Venezuela's bank accounts in New York and London to this shadow government. The Bank of England seized $2 billion in Venezuelan gold. The U.S. seized Cietgo. Suddenly, the Maduro government lost control of its biggest foreign asset. Cietgo, valued at over $13 billion, stopped sending dividends to Venezuela. That is billions of dollars a year in revenue that used to buy medicine and food, now frozen in American accounts. The Shadow Board, appointed by Guaido, used Cietgo's funds to pay for their own political expenses and legal fees, effectively burning the asset from the inside. The humiliation continued. In September 2024, the U.S. Justice Department seized Maduro's personal aircraft, a Dassault Falcon 900EX, in the Dominican Republic. They flew it to Florida. The Attorney General bragged about it. It was a message: "We can touch you anywhere. Your sovereignty does not exist." It was an act of piracy dressed up as law enforcement, designed to show the Venezuelan military that their leader could not even protect his own transport. Now we arrive at the endgame, the foreclosure auction. In late 2025, a U.S. federal judge in Delaware, Judge Leonard Stark, authorized the final sale of CITGO to pay off creditors. The winning bidder was a shell company called Amber Energy, an affiliate of Elliott Investment Management. Who is Elliott? They are the most notorious vulture fund in the world. They are the same people who seized an Argentine naval ship a decade ago to collect on old debts. The sale price was approximately $5.9 billion. Remember, CITGO was valued at up to $13 billion. It was sold for less than half its value. The auction was a fire sale. The U.S. courts had blocked Venezuela from sending legitimate lawyers to defend the asset because they didn't recognize the Attorney General. Imagine being sued, but the judge forbids you from hiring a lawyer, rules against you by default, and then sells your house to the plaintiff for half price. That is what happened to Citgo. This sale was the death blow. Without Citgo, Venezuela lost its ability to refine its oil in the U.S. market permanently. It lost its strategic anchor. The revenue loss from the sanction strategy is estimated by economists like Francisco Rodriguez to be over $200 billion, 3 times the size of the Venezuelan economy. The country was hollowed out, the infrastructure crumbled, the teachers fled, the doctors fled. And in this vacuum, the operation of January 2026 took place. The U.S. military didn't need to fight a war. They just needed a kick in the door of a house that had already collapsed. So, as Maduro sits in a cell in New York, watch what happens next. The transition government will be installed. The IMF will arrive with a loan package to rebuild the country, but the loan will come with conditions. The new government will be forced to privatize the oil industry. The new hydrocarbons law, already drafted in English, will lower royalties back to the single digits. Chevron, Exxon, and the buyers of CITGO will return. They will repair the pumps. The oil will flow again. The GDP numbers will go up. The news will say the miracle returns. But look closely at the ledger. The revenue won't go to the schools in Petare. It won't go to the hospitals in Maracaibo. It will go to service the debt. It will go to pay the IMF. It will go to dividends in Houston. The $300 billion that was stolen from the Venezuelan people over the last decade is the sunk cost of this war. It is gone forever. The tragedy of Venezuela is not that it failed, it is that it was not allowed to succeed. The 100-Year War was a demonstration of a brutal reality. In the global financial system, sovereignty is a privilege, not a right. And if you sit on 300 billion barrels of oil, you do not own that oil. You are merely holding it for the empire until they decide they need it back. The arrest of the president is the receipt. The ruins of the Venezuelan economy are the balance sheet. And the pumps at CITGO that will soon be pumping cheap gas into American SUVs are the dividend. I'm James, and this is The Hidden Balance. Subscribe now to stay ahead of the curve because when the history books are written, you'll want to be among the few who saw it coming. Don't forget to subscribe. Join those who see what others ignore.